There's a fracture point where a fairy tale bleeds into a nightmare. For Azariyah Vance, that fracture happened when the hands that just slipped a wedding ring onto her finger violently shoved her into the abyss. Today, I'm bringing you a story about a betrayal so cold it freezes the blood, and the impossible lengths a lethal underworld boss went to when the only woman who ever truly saw him fell from the sky. Welcome to Afro-Korean Cartel Stories. Let's begin. The white silk of her wedding dress tore against the wrought iron railing first, then came the rush of the night air, then nothing. 40 floors above the glittering city skyline, Azariyah Vance went over the edge on the night she was supposed to celebrate her happily ever after. And the last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her wasn't the terror of the drop. It was her new husband, Lucien, leaning aggressively over the balcony in his tailored dark suit, his face locked in grim determination, while her mother-in-law, Verena, watched from the doorway in her cream evening gown with the calm, cold gaze of a woman checking an item off a to-do list. For seconds of freefall. That's what the police reports would theoretically calculate later. Gravity doesn't care about white satin, a perfectly styled high-braided bun, or the hundreds of elite guests inside who never heard her desperate, mid-air scream because the string quartet was playing too loudly and the heavy glass doors were already sealed. She hit a reinforced glass and steel architectural canopy on the 36th floor. A decorative awning meant to shield the lower terrace from rain, not to catch a falling bride. The impact shattered her left arm, fractured 4 ribs, and tore a jagged gash across her collarbone that would leave a permanent scar she would trace for the rest of her life. But the reinforced steel held. The canopy spider-webbed with cracks, but it didn't give way, and Azariyah Vance did not die. Not that anyone up on the 40th floor knew that. Not that they bothered to look. Not that Lucien or Verena peered over the edge to confirm the kill, or did the single human thing the moment required. The balcony doors simply locked. The champagne continued to flow. The elite crowd kept toasting to a union that had already been violently liquidated for a payout. And the bride was left bleeding out 4 floors below their designer shoes, wrapped in ruined white silk, while the night wind turned her dark skin to ice. If you're new here, welcome to Afro-Korean Cartel Stories. We tell the stories that make your blood run cold and your heart pound. Hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss a single detail, because trust me, you are not ready for the revenge this woman is about to build. Hours before she was left bleeding on that cold glass, Azariyah Vance was whole. She was a woman built on hard work and quiet discipline. Working long shifts as a clinic nurse, she spent her days caring for others, secretly hungry for a sense of permanence, a real family to call her own. She did not have much money, but she made her small city apartment feel like a palace, hunting for cheap treasures at thrift stores and painting the walls in warm, bright colors. When Lucien Holbrook first noticed her, her best friend, Kiera, sat on Azariyah's cheap sofa, watching her get ready for their first date. Kiera crossed her arms and said, "A guy with that kind of money? He better be worth your time, sorry." At first, he was. Lucien had walked into her clinic during a charity photo shoot, but he ignored the cameras. He looked right at Azariyah. For the first time in her life, a man looked past her budget clothes and simply saw her, without any conditions. Before long, Lucien pulled her into the Holbrook family's world. It was a dazzling, sparkling place full of crystal chandeliers and velvet chairs. But the edges of that world were freezing cold. Every time Azariyah stepped into one of their massive party rooms, she realized she was the only black woman there. The wealthy guests gave her tight, fake smiles. Verena, Lucien's mother, would stare at Azariyah with blank, unblinking eyes, measuring her like a cheap piece of furniture that didn't belong in her perfect house. Azariyah felt the chill, but she chose to look past it. She focused on Lucien's warm words and gentle touches. She thought her love could melt the ice. Then came the night he dropped to one knee. He slid a massive diamond engagement ring onto her finger. The stone was heavy and caught the light perfectly. To the elite Holbrook family, that ring was just a shiny prop. But to Azariyah, looking down at her hand through happy tears, it meant something else entirely. She believed it meant she was finally safe. She believed it meant forever. While Azariyah believed she was stepping into a fairy tale, a man in the shadows knew the truth about monsters. Teriak lived at the very top of a dark, violent world. As the boss of the city's most feared syndicate, his life was built on debts, loyalty, and cold, hard fear. Men bowed when he walked into a room. Enemies vanished when he gave a single nod. But with absolute power came complete isolation. Teriak was a king locked in a tower of his own making, surrounded by guards, but entirely alone. Nobody spoke to him without a hidden agenda. Nobody looked him in the eye for longer than a second. Nobody, except a tired nurse on a rainy evening 5 months ago. It was a brief, accidental moment that anyone else would have forgotten. Teriak had been sitting in the quiet waiting room of Azariyah's clinic. One of his top men was inside, recovering from a bad fight. Teriak's dark suit was damp from the rain, and his jaw was set like stone. People normally crossed the hallway to avoid that dangerous look. But Azariyah did not walk past him. She had just finished a brutal 12-hour shift. She did not know his name, his power, or the blood on his hands. She only saw a man who looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. She walked over and handed him a paper cup of hot green tea. "You look like you're fighting a war in your head," she said, her voice soft and steady. "Take a breath. The rain always stops eventually." She did not ask for a favor. She did not shrink away. She simply offered a warm smile and walked away into the night. It was just a cup of tea and 2 sentences. But to a man who only ever heard lies, threats, and begging, her pure kindness felt like a sudden earthquake. Her words lodged in his chest like a splinter he could not pull out. For 5 months, Teriak carried the memory of her deep brown skin, her gentle voice, and her absolute lack of fear. He did not know why he kept tracking her from a distance, but he did. And on the night of her wedding, he was the only one who heard her fall. Azariyah thought her perfect wedding took 6 months to plan. In truth, her murder took exactly 8. Verena Holbrook did not see a new daughter when she looked at Azariyah. She saw a simple solution to a massive, ugly problem. The Holbrook family name was still famous in the city, but their bank accounts were completely empty. They secretly owed millions to very dangerous people. Verena needed cash, and she needed a lot of it fast. The timeline of the trap was built like a dark, cruel calendar. 8 months before the wedding, Verena selected Azariyah. She picked her because the young nurse was kind, trusting, and had no wealthy or powerful family to ask angry questions later. 7 months out, Lucien began to date her. He followed his mother's careful script step by step, playing the perfect, loving boyfriend. 5 months out, right before the wedding save-the-dates were even printed or mailed to guests, Lucien signed a massive life insurance policy. It was worth $10 million. Hidden deep in the fine print was a special rule. The payout would double if the death was a tragic accident. Like a sudden, terrible fall. For months out, Verena hired a private investigator. She did not pay him to find real secrets about Azariyah. She paid him to create fake ones. He set up false emails and fake credit card charges to make it look like Azariyah was deeply unstable and reckless. They were building a believable story. When the bride finally fell, the elite world needed to think she was a troubled woman who made a tragic mistake. 3 months out, Verena quietly paid off the building's security manager. She made sure certain cameras on the 40th floor would conveniently stop working on the wedding night. Most brides look at a wedding timeline and see cake tastings, dress fittings, and flower choices. But for the right kind of monsters, a wedding is just a beautiful mask. The guest list was a group of witnesses. The loud orchestra music was a way to cover up a scream. The open balcony was not a place for a romantic kiss. It was a perfectly designed drop. Every single detail was bought and arranged with cold focus. While Azariyah spent her small savings on a white silk dress, Verena was busy planning her funeral. The wedding night was a beautiful, sparkling lie. Azariyah stood at the altar, her heart full of hope. She smiled through happy tears as Lucien held her hands and promised to protect her forever. Hundreds of wealthy guests clapped as they kissed. To everyone watching, a real marriage was being born. It was a flawless performance. At the reception, the live band played loudly. Azariyah danced under glowing crystal chandeliers, feeling like a queen in her flowing white silk dress. But slowly, the invisible trap began to close around her. Verena stood near the edge of the ballroom in her elegant cream gown, sipping champagne. She caught Lucien's eye across the room and gave him a single, cold nod. The final instruction was given. Lucien gently pulled Azariyah away from the crowded dance floor. He whispered that he wanted a private moment with his beautiful bride, away from all the noise and flashing cameras. Trusting him completely, she let him lead her down a quiet, empty hallway toward the grand penthouse balcony. She had no idea the security system had already been turned off. The night air was cool on the 40th floor. Azariyah smiled and turned to look out at the glittering city lights. She expected a romantic embrace. Instead, Lucien stepped quickly behind her. His face was no longer kind. It was tense and hard with dark calculation. Before she could even take a breath, his hands slammed hard against her back. It was a violent, aggressive shove that lifted her feet off the stone floor. Sudden, blinding panic froze her blood. As she tumbled backward over the cold iron railing, her desperate scream ripped through the open air. In her final glimpse of the penthouse, she saw Verena stepping into the doorway, watching her drop with blank, uncaring eyes. The heavy glass doors quickly pulled shut by unseen hands, locking the loud party music safely inside. As Azariyah plummeted into the dark sky, the noise of the glittering world faded away entirely. There was only the violent rush of the wind tearing at her dress. And then, absolute silence. The silence after the fall did not last long. Down on the street below, the city kept moving, completely unaware of the broken bride on the 36th floor. But Quan Teriak had heard the scream. He did not call the police. In his dangerous world, calling the authorities was just another way to get someone killed. Instead, he made a single, quiet phone call. Within minutes, a team of his most trusted men slipped into the building's maintenance levels. They moved like shadows. There were no flashing ambulance lights and no official reports. They found Azariyah lying on the cracked glass canopy, her white dress soaked in red. She was barely breathing, but she was alive. They carefully lifted her onto a dark stretcher and carried her out through a hidden service elevator, leaving no trace behind. The black van drove quickly to a heavily guarded safe house on the edge of the city. Waiting inside was Dr. Lin, a private doctor who worked for the syndicate. She did not ask questions, and she did not keep legal records. Her only job was to keep Teriak's people alive. For 6 long, tense hours, the doctor worked in the underground medical room. She set Azariyah's shattered arm, bound her broken ribs, and stitched the deep cut across her collarbone. Out in the quiet hallway, Teriak stood completely still. His jaw was locked tight. Every time he heard a weak sound of pain through the heavy door, his hands curled into fists. He remembered the cup of tea and the kind smile she had given him months ago. He silently promised that the people who did this to her would pay. When Azariyah finally opened her eyes, 2 days had passed. The room was dim and quiet. Her whole body felt like it was made of lead and fire. A medical monitor beeped softly beside her bed. As her vision cleared, she saw Teriak sitting in a chair in the corner, watching her with dark, serious eyes. The memories of the balcony, the violent push, and Lucien's cold face came crashing back into her mind. Sudden panic gripped her chest. "Kiera," Azariyah whispered, her voice rough and dry. "My best friend, she thinks I'm dead. I need to call." Teriak leaned forward into the light. His voice was gentle, but as firm as a locked door. "Not yet." 2 weeks later, Azariyah was finally strong enough to walk down the hall. She sat at the small, metal kitchen table in the safe house. Her left arm was still in a heavy sling, and her chest ached with every breath. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the dark questions burning in her mind. She needed to know why. Quan Teriak walked into the kitchen carrying a thick brown folder. He did not look at her with pity. He looked at her with the deep respect of a soldier talking to a survivor. He sat across from her, sliding the papers over the smooth table. My people dug into the Holbrook family's bank accounts, Taryuk said, his voice quiet but firm. I will not lie to you, Azariyah. You asked for the full truth, and you deserve to hear it. He opened the folder. The first page was a life insurance policy. It had Lucien's neat signature at the bottom. The paper showed a massive number, $10 million. Taryuk pointed to a small paragraph near the end. It was an accidental death clause. If the new bride died in a sudden, tragic accident, like a terrible fall from a balcony, the payout would double to $20 million. Azariyah stared at the papers. The typed words blurred together. When did he sign this? She whispered. 5 months ago, Taryuk answered. Before he even proposed to you. He laid out more documents. They showed a mountain of secret debts. The Holbrook family owed money to very dangerous people. Verena and Lucien were completely broke. They needed a massive amount of cash to save their elite, wealthy lifestyle. The terrible truth hit Azariyah like a physical blow. The flowers, the gentle smiles, the sweet words at the clinic, none of it was real. Lucien's entire courtship was a carefully planned business deal. He did not see her as a woman to love. He saw her as a walking bank account, an asset to be married and then quickly thrown away. Taryuk watched her process the nightmare. He did not reach out to hold her hand. He did not offer empty words of comfort to soften the blow. He sat with her in the harsh light, honoring her strength by letting her face the cold, ugly truth without hiding a single detail. For days after seeing the files, Azariyah was quiet. She finally let herself feel the heavy, crushing weight of her grief. In the dim light of the safe house, she cried for the family she thought she had, and for the trusting, hopeful woman who died on that balcony. But when the tears finally stopped, something else took their place. Her anger did not arrive like a wild, burning fire. It arrived like cold, hard bricks. It built itself inside her chest, creating a strong, solid wall that no one would ever break down again. The anger formed a new foundation. She was no longer a broken victim. She was a survivor forming a plan. During those long weeks, a quiet understanding grew between her and Quan Taryuk. Their bond was built on closeness and complete honesty. He never treated her like she was weak or broken. When she could not reach a high shelf because of her healing arm, he quietly moved the cups lower without saying a word. When terrible nightmares woke her up in a cold sweat, she would find him sitting in the hallway outside her door, standing guard in the dark. They did not talk about these small, careful actions. They just let them happen, sharing a silent respect. One evening, they sat by the window looking out at the distant city lights. Taryuk turned to her and offered a choice. He told her his men could ruin the Holbrook family. He could destroy Lucien and Verena quietly, keeping Azariyah completely safe and far away from the danger. Azariyah looked down at the jagged red scar healing across her collarbone. She slowly traced the raised skin with her fingers. Then, she looked up and met Taryuk's dark, serious eyes. No, she said, her voice steady and clear. I do not want to hide in this house while your men do the work. They threw me away like I was nothing. I want them to look me in the eye when their perfect world falls apart. Taryuk stayed completely still, listening closely to every word. I am done being protected, Azariyah told the dangerous boss. I do not want to be a witness watching from the shadows. When the time comes, I want to be the weapon. A deep, quiet respect filled Taryuk's face. He gave her a single nod. The decision was made. The plan was built over the next few weeks across the small, metal kitchen table. Maps, floor plans, and printed emails covered the smooth surface. Quan Taryuk and Azariyah sat across from each other, quietly studying the details of their trap. The target was the Holbrook Memorial Gala. It was set for a cool Friday evening, exactly 2 months after the wedding night. For Verena Holbrook, this gala was her shining crown. It was the most important social event of the year, packed with wealthy donors, powerful politicians, and local news cameras. She was going to use the party to play the grieving mother-in-law, raising money and sympathy while secretly waiting for the massive insurance check to clear. Azariyah prepared for the night the way a soldier prepares for battle. She did not choose a soft, flowing gown like the white silk she wore on her wedding day. Instead, she chose a sharp, dark dress that fit her like armor. The neckline dipped low, leaving the jagged, red scar across her collarbone completely bare. She did not want to hide the ugly mark Lucien had given her. She wanted the elite crowd to see exactly what survival looked like. On the night before the gala, the safe house was very quiet. Taryuk stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching Azariyah look over the guest list one last time. His dark eyes were careful, and his posture was stiff. He knew the danger of walking back into the viper's nest. "Tomorrow, everything changes," Taryuk said, his voice a low rumble in the silent room. "Once you walk through those doors, the whole city will know you are alive. The Halbrooks will panic. There is no turning back. I need to ask you one last time. Are you certain this is what you want?" Azariyah did not look away. She stood up, her dark skin glowing in the dim light, and gently touched the raised scar on her chest. "They pushed me into the dark," Azariyah answered, her voice cold and perfectly steady. "I survived a fall that was supposed to end me. I have been certain since the moment I hit the ground." Taryuk nodded slowly. The weapon was fully forged. It was time to strike. The Holbrook Memorial Gala was in full swing. 300 wealthy guests stood under the bright crystal chandeliers, holding glasses of expensive champagne. At the front of the room, Verena Holbrook wore a perfect, sad smile. Lucien stood beside her, playing the part of the heartbroken widower. Then, the heavy wooden doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. The live music stopped instantly. A cold silence swept across the massive room. 300 people turned their heads and stared in absolute shock. A woman who was supposed to be dead was walking right through the front doors. Azariyah Vance stepped into the light. She wore her dark dress like armor. The deep, jagged scar across her collarbone was completely visible for everyone to see. She did not look down, and she did not shake. "I am not a ghost," Azariyah said. Her steady, powerful voice echoed across the ballroom that once made her feel so small. "And my fall was not an accident." Behind Verena and Lucien, the massive projector screens suddenly lit up. They did not show pictures of a happy wedding. They showed the $10 million insurance policy. They showed the secret bank records and the massive Holbrook family debt. They showed the cold, hard proof of a murder plan. For the first time in 30 years, Verena's perfect mask completely shattered. The glass of champagne slipped from her hand and crashed onto the marble floor. Her face went pale with pure terror. Lucien's fake sadness vanished. Blind panic took over. He spun around and sprinted toward a side exit to escape. But a tall, dark figure stepped out of the shadows, firmly blocking the door. Taryuk stood there, his jaw set like stone, making sure the rat could not escape the trap. Azariyah did not stay to watch the elite crowd turn on them. She had delivered her truth and reclaimed her life. She turned around and walked back down the center aisle. Taryuk left the side door and fell into step right beside her. He did not walk in front to lead the way, and he did not walk behind to guard her. This was her victory, and he honored her strength. They stepped through the double doors into the quiet, empty hallway. Without saying a single word, Taryuk reached out. Azariyah's hand found his, their fingers locking together tightly. Some things did not need to be spoken out loud to be completely true.